Hi there, I'm Zach Kircher, and you're watching Kircher Talks Entertainment. The Oscars may have already happened on March 2nd, but I'm not done talking about the best of 2024. So buckle up, baby. We got some movies to talk about. 2023 was always going to be a hard act to follow, considering that huge movies like Barbie and Oppenheimer completely took over the pop culture conversation that year. By contrast, it seems like the popular opinion among most people is that 2024 was a kind of a sucky year for movies. Sure, I mean, they can think that if the only movies they watched were Hollywood slop or Megalopolis. But what if I told you that there were actually plenty of legitimately great movies that came out in 2024? Well, as a matter of fact, plenty did. One just needs to pay attention to what's actually coming out in order to notice the good stuff. But I digress, that's a topic for another video. Today, I just want to focus on the best movies that 2024 had to offer. If you take anything away from this video, please let it be that you should not only check out every movie that I mentioned here, but also I hope that in the future, this year and beyond, you will broaden your palette and take risks on bolder, more interesting movies in the future. Don't do it for me though. Do it for you and to secure the future of the movie business. Anyway, I first want to share some honorable mentions. All of these movies were really good, some even great. They just didn't quite hit hard enough for me to actually include among my absolute favorites. I will list them in alphabetical order. Flow deserves attention not just for the fact that it was animated by pretty much one dude in Latvia using Blender, but that it actually told a great story with beautiful visuals and animals just being their cute selves. A great film for people of all ages, especially for parents who want to train their kids to pay attention to what they're watching. It may not have been my favorite animation of 2024, but I think it's super meaningful that it took home the Oscar. The Last Stop in Yuma County is one of the rare movies imitating Tarantino's style that actually does it right, while standing on its own 2 feet as a solid thriller set in a single location. Music by John Williams was comfort food for me, having been a fan of his film scores since childhood. It was one of my favorite documentaries of 2024 simply by the virtue of its subject. Perfect Days may be about a guy who cleans toilets for a living, but that doesn't mean this little slice of life story is any less worthy of being told. There's plenty of beauty in its simplicity and power in the words that aren't said, rather than the words that are. Problemista is a quirky comedy with an ultra-specific perspective on life, one which I appreciated getting through the humor and emotions inherent in the story. I'm grateful for what writer, director, and star Julio Torres had to say about the immigrant experience with this movie. Rebel Ridge is yet another excellent thriller from director Jeremy Saulnier, yet unlike his other movies, I appreciate that it manages to be suspenseful while keeping the blood and body count to a minimum. It's a slow burn with excellent performances, meaningful themes, and one of the most satisfying finales of any movie released last year. Robot Dreams was one of a handful of animated movies released last year about robots with feelings, and it's a dang heartfelt one at that. Like Flow, it also manages to tell a great story without a single line of spoken words. Superman the Christopher Reeve story is the best new documentary I watched last year. Take that with a grain of salt since I didn't really watch that many, but that doesn't take away from how impactful this ode to the Reed family ended up being. It manages to be honest about Christopher Reeve's mistakes, while also serving as a moving tribute to his life and legacy. Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul didn't hit quite as hard for me as other films in this series have, but it's still an insanely creative and hilarious adventure that carries this duo's legacy well into the modern era. Check out my review if you want more of my thoughts on this one. And finally, The Wild Robot is the best new DreamWorks movie since the original How to Train Your Dragon. I still think that other animated movies from 2024 had more subtlety and interesting things to say, but as a new parent, I appreciated how relatable this story was to me. Alright, now that we've gotten those out of the way, let's get into the actual top 10 list. And we'll start with number 10! We're going to start things off on a relatively controversial note here, but hey, I guess I like stirring the pot as much as Alex Garland did with Civil War. Like pretty much everyone else on the internet, I assumed that Civil War was going to attempt to pick a side in its own fictional conflict. Hey, I mean, it was released in an election year, so why not? But that expectation was perhaps the wrong one for the marketing to focus on, since the movie we actually got was far more interesting. Civil War is less of a traditional war film and more of a riff on Heart of Darkness, where characters are thrust into a series of perilous situations that fundamentally changes them as people. It just so happens that those people are photojournalists, and I was really fascinated by the perspective that this movie filters through these characters. Seeing the death-defying lengths that the cast of characters go through to photograph traumatic imagery spoke volumes to me about the price that is paid to record history and shape narrative for the masses. All of this Civil War stuff is really just window dressing for an allegory about the ethics of camera work and thrill seeking, one that is effective through its images, haunting sound design, and subtle character moments do all the heavy lifting. Some may have been disappointed by this movie's lack of specific political messaging. I, for one, though, left this movie more distrustful of all of the noise and conflicting voices around me trying to command my attention, especially for those speaking on controversial topics. It's a message that has not left my mind since first watching this movie, and I will think about its many striking sights and sounds for a long time.
Number 9!
Now, unlike Civil War, where that movie was very subtle in its approach, the substance is completely and unequivocally insane. It is so on the nose that the actors might as well have worn signs on their foreheads that says, "This is what the movie's about." But the thing is that when a filmmaker knows exactly what they want their movie to be and goes for it with all of the confidence that they can muster, it doesn't matter how painfully obvious their intentions may have been. The substance is that lightning in a bottle kind of explosion of creativity where you get a really interesting concept, and the filmmakers spared no expense to execute that vision with all of the ferocity and wackiness that writer-director Coralie Farge wanted. It's basically a feature-length episode of The Twilight Zone or Black Mirror, and I mean that in the best way possible, for it may be a techno-social fable about unrealistic beauty standards, but it never fails to be an absolutely good time. It's darkly comedic, the main character's journey is unforgettably tragic, the filmmaking, especially the editing, is top-notch, and with it being a body horror film, it features some of the most impressive prosthetics work that I've ever seen, which more than justifies the Academy Award it won for makeup and hairstyling. Above all, though, the thing that I really appreciate about the substance is that it's just simple. Because the story is so straightforward with its world building, character motivations, and themes, that allowed this movie to flourish more as a compelling story. This was surely one of the most memorable horror films of the 2020s so far.
Number 8!
I wasn't quite on the hype train for Dune when Part 1 came out a few years ago, but I definitely saw the potential for it. Thankfully, Part 2 capitalized on that potential and delivered a sci-fi spectacle for the ages. I genuinely think that if Denis Villeneuve delivers with his adaptation of Dune Messiah next year, then we'd basically have this decade's equivalent of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Needless to say, the second chapter worked much better for me than what came before because things clicked more with the characters, themes, and world building for me. It's not that Villeneuve dumbed things down for the audience. The story was just more cohesive and a greater degree of emotion was coursing through it. Everything about this film just feels grander yet simultaneously more reined in, considering that the stakes are higher and the action scenes are on a larger scale. And even with all that being the case, the personal journeys of those characters are better defined. This is especially the case for Paul Atreides, due in large part for how much Timothée Chalamet was able to sell the inner turmoil that his character dealt with as he reluctantly accepted his messianic persona. In the end, the first film left me skeptical for this series, but Part 2 has got me excited for the finale coming next year.
Number 7!
Now this may shock you, but Dune Part 2 was not my favorite sci-fi action flick of the last year. In fact, there are two that I liked better, the first of which is a French animated film called Mars Express. I do appreciate that a lot of smaller, more independently produced animated films got their due this past year, but this film, even with that being the case, deserved so much more than it got. G-Kids released this for a single week in May last year to basically no fanfare at all, and so nobody saw it except for a handful of people like me and my buddy Jared late on a Thursday night. It's a shame since this kind of movie has broad appeal with it being a cyberpunk detective thriller, and it's a dang good one at that. Sure, it was very obviously influenced by things like Blade Runner, Cowboy Bebop, and Ghost in the Shell, but it does more than enough on its own to stand out due to its world building and very efficient storytelling. What astonished me the most about it was that despite the fact that it's less than 90 minutes long, there are so many small details in this universe that are seamlessly tied into the dialogue and the visuals that there is no need for exposition at all. The film is just confident enough in what it's doing that it trusts the audience to simply pay attention and keep up, which was very rewarding as a viewer. It's about as lean as a trimmed steak, and yet hits just as strongly as any other tried and true sci-fi classic. Give it maybe 5 or 10 years and every film YouTuber out there will be gassing it up like the undiscovered masterpiece that it deserves to be known as.
Number 6.
Compared to Mars Express, Furiosa was much more loudly discussed in the public conversation, but it arguably had an even worse fate. Its box office results were disastrous, which likely put plans for Mad Max The Wasteland on the back burner, and the film received absolutely no fanfare from the Academy. There were a lot of reasons you could probably cite for why things happened that way, but just like with Mars Express, I think time will be kind to George Miller for making a wildly different movie than what he gave us with Fury Road. Whereas that movie was a near constant action scene, this prequel isn't firing off on all cylinders, and for the better in my opinion. Its narrative is more deliberately paced, and personally, I appreciated that I got to just settle in with this world more and just get all of these lore drops. More than any of the other Mad Max movies, this came across as George Miller cracking open like some kind of codex and reading straight from its contents, all the while as audiences gathered around a campfire as this master storyteller just tells tales from the Australian wasteland. It certainly felt that way to me, anyway, given the extremely strong art direction, the incredible action sequences, especially the one in the middle section, and perhaps most of all, the wacky larger-than-life characters, the most prominent of which enabled Chris Hemsworth to give the performance of his career. It's sad to think that because of this movie's box office, we probably aren't going to get much more from the Mad Max series. I mean, George Miller's like pushing 80 at this point too. But at least we can treasure Furiosa and Fury Road for the wild, adventurous double feature for what they are.
Number 5.
I really respond to stories that touch on the themes of art and inspiring people, and this past year, no film did that to a better degree than Sing Sing. And if you're wondering, no, it's not a movie about singing. The title refers to the maximum security prison in New York by the same name, where the story takes place. This movie serves as like a very interesting crossroads between reality and fiction, given that the story itself is fictional, but it's inspired by a real-life program called Rehabilitation Through the Arts, where inmates are given an outlet to express themselves through putting on plays for the prison. Former prisoners and participants in the real-life program also rounded out the cast that was headlined by an outstanding Oscar-nominated Coleman Domingo. Needless to say, for all of its merits as an artistic experiment, but also as a moving story about the power of hope, Sing Sing completely floored me. Most prison movies are these gritty dramas about how hard life is behind the concrete walls, and certainly Sing Sing doesn't shy away from those things, but it also has a lot of value in showing the possibilities for even hardened criminals to come to terms with themselves. Watching these men workshop through their wacky time travel play while also navigating their collective trauma was a deeply emotional experience for me. And I think anyone, especially other men, can greatly benefit from what this movie accomplished. Simply put, this movie has the power to change lives, and I think it will.
Number 4.
When people talk about the best modern filmmakers, some people might be inclined to call out Christopher Nolan, David Fincher, Quentin Tarantino, and so on and so forth. And sure, those guys have made genuine classics, but you know a modern filmmaker who has not let me down once so far? In fact, all of their movies are at least like a 9 out of 10 for me. Yes, that would be Robert Eggers. And his latest and arguably best movie yet, Nosferatu, is just yet another super solid banger from the guy. Even when you ignore the fact that this is the second remake of the original silent film from Germany, which was, a Dracula adaptation anyway, it may still be the most well-realized and haunting version of this story yet. I'd even go as far as to say that this is my favorite horror movie of the decade so far. Coming from me, that might not mean much, since a lot of movies that oppressed other people didn't really hit me in quite the same way, but even so, Nosferatu is a movie that thrives on vibes. The score, cinematography, makeup, art direction, performances, everything is just so pitch perfect in its execution here. I felt terror and dread emanating from this movie that I have not experienced in a very long time. So much so that images from it have actually penetrated my dreams. And perhaps most important of all, beyond how immaculately produced it may be, it's just a well-told and compelling campfire story at the end of the day. Robert Eggers just knows how to make folklore work in a way that is both timeless, but also poignant for the modern era. I look forward to the next time that I can immerse myself in this depraved, terrifying nightmare, as weird as that may sound.
Number 3.
If Challengers came out in the 90s, you can bet that it would have made like $500 million at the box office. The main trio of actors would have been featured on the cover of every tabloid magazine on the planet, and the movie just would have had a clean sweep at the Oscars. Needless to say, Luca Guadagnino's electrifying movie about a trio of toxic tennis players is the stuff that movies are made for. I can recommend this to just about anybody, since it offers so much in its 130-minute runtime. It's unbelievably sexy, full of chaotic energy, features some of the most incredible filmmaking you'll ever see in a sports movie, especially in the last few minutes. Holy cow. And the characters may be the most horrible human beings that you've ever seen, but they're the kind of people that you can't help but be mesmerized by as they navigate their different struggles. Zendaya, Mike Feist, and Josh O'Connor deliver some of the year's best performances as their characters play this figurative tennis match of bouncing between friendships, rivalries, and even romantic entanglements. It's a film of pure entertainment value that is also made with the proper amount of gravitas and intelligence to make it much more than the average movie. Don't dismiss this movie simply because you heard it's just a Zendaya threesome movie. Not only is that a gross misrepresentation of what Challengers actually is, what we actually got is loads better.
Number 2.
Memoir of a Snail was the best animated movie that came out in 2024, and I would rank it right alongside Wolfwalkers and Marcel the Shells with Shoes On as one of the best animations of the decade. For one thing, I'm a huge sucker for stop-motion animation, so this being made with so many wildly inventive puppets was immediately appealing to me. But more importantly, this movie just feels honest. None of the writing here feels contrived like how so many other animated films trivialize human life. It depicts the messiness of our shared experience with a raw sense of honesty that you hardly ever see in movies in general. Those are the sorts of stories that I respond to the most, the ones that feel like they came directly from the heart of the person that made it. Memoir of a Snail is exactly that, a deeply personal narrative of a character whose life feels completely authentic and full of many extreme ups and downs. That makes it a very depressing film to sit through, I'm not gonna lie, given that it grapples with some immensely heavy subject matter, but it also ends up being a very rewarding watch too. Wading through the sorrow of the story only to reach its bittersweet conclusion is a lot like how life is for those who endure it well. Maybe that's why I ultimately responded so well to it, for not only does it tell a fascinating story with all of the power that animation can muster, but it actually left me with a more hopeful outlook on life. I needed that kind of a pick-me-up in my life given everything that is going on in the world, and so I have Adam Elliott and his fantastic animated movie to thank for that. Now, all of the movies I have previously mentioned are truly special. I would wholeheartedly recommend all of them to you. When it comes down to it though, there is one that I treasure above them all. It's the kind of movie that I watch and won't shut up about for the rest of time. And believe me, people I talked to over the past year can attest to the fact that I didn't shut up about it. But without further ado, let me introduce you to my favorite movie of 2024, which is... No joke, this is actually my favorite movie of the entire decade. At least so far. We'll see if something tops it. But believe me when I say that a filmmaker is seriously gonna have to blow my socks off if they have any hope of topping this for me. I don't want to come across as like hyperbolic in saying that, but Hundreds of Beavers made a huge impression on me just for being one of the funniest, if not the absolute funniest, movies I've ever seen in my life. I've watched it 3 times now, and I've laughed hysterically all 3 times. It's unlike any other comedy I've seen as well, where it seamlessly blends influences from things like silent comedy, Monty Python, Looney Tunes, and even open-world action RPGs of all things. And that combination creates a sense of humor that is not only unique, but also rewarding. Hundreds of Beavers shows that there is truly a method to the madness when it comes to comedy, for it thrives on a formula of setting up jokes, paying off the jokes, and then providing a new twist on said joke as they become increasingly hilarious running gags as the movie runs on. That's what allows this movie to not only be funny from start to finish, but somehow it gets funnier as it goes on. It's a huge feat of creativity and editing that the filmmakers were able to pull off a comedy where pretty much every joke hits. More than that though, I mean, the fact that it is so funny is a huge reason why it stuck with me, but really, the reason why this hit so hard for me is because of what it represents for the art of filmmaking. We hear so often nowadays that Hollywood is devoid of ideas, that everything is a remake, sequel, reboot, spin-off, whatever, and that there are so many movies that waste time, talent, and resources. I mean, just look at all of the insane flops that we've seen at the box office these past couple years. I think people are fed up with that crap. Sometimes I see those movies come and go, and then I can understand why people might think movies are dead. But Hundreds of Beavers challenges that perspective. First of all, it was made on a tiny budget of $150,000.
Ooh, that's kind of small.
Secondly, director Mike Cheslick refused to sell off their movie to a distributor, funding its marketing pretty much all on their own. And the amazing thing is that these guys were so confident in their vision and executed it with such unbridled creativity that you can tell that they didn't waste a single penny putting their ideas on the screen. In an era when so many studios struggle to make worthwhile blockbusters for less than $150 million, here comes a movie made at a severe fraction of those figures and is one of the most entertaining and inventive films ever made. I fully believe that Hundreds of Beavers will be part of a new breed of movies that will inspire the next generation of artists. Since if these guys can make such a wacky, left-field movie on a shoestring budget and yet still come up with something this good, then maybe you can too. Until that happens, I will continue to sing this movie's praises. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to let me know what your favorite movies of 2024 were as well. And otherwise, if you liked this video, please do give it a like and subscribe to the channel. For doing both of those things will help me out greatly, and I will see you all in the next one.